Okay.
There's room here for you.
That's a nice view of that here and there.
That's right.
And you'll be able to say, well, I actually didn't
Just
look
took it
at
all
all
that
that
night.
night. That's great, do that again.
You guys expect anybody else?
No, they're fine.
Somebody just pulled in behind me, so there might be one more.
We'll wait 15 seconds now.
Sure. Do we have another, no, it's, all of our regular members are here.
All the regulars,
Okay.
I guess David,
Is David gonna come? Would we need David?
I'll be happy to.
Huh?
Do we need David?
Which David?
David Robbins?
No, he's
No,
not.
he's not the one.
No, he's excused from
There's
this.
a PDF version, there's another one, yeah.
One meeting he doesn't have to go
They're
to.
both the same.
Okay. Okay.
Chris told me they were.
Just told you they're both the same, okay.
Hello,
Hi. Are these seats taken?
a public, a public.
A public.
All right.
Okay, so it's 7:03, call the meeting to order. So the first question was,
Yeah, what do we want to
Hi,
accomplish?
Carl. Come on up, you can,
so I think we should go through the presentation because a lot of people haven't seen it, and maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes going through so people can at least get a flavor for it. The two things I was hoping to accomplish tonight is decide as a group whether or not we agree that this is a final product or it's not a final product. And then whether or not the date of the 17th is realistic. So those would be the two main things that I would try to get out of tonight. And people may decide that they need more time with the document because it just got sent at 4:05 and we may not make that first decision.
So,
This isn't the same thing as I have on my
let's see
computer.
what you have,
It's a different picture.
growth and taxes.
It's the same presentation.
One's a
I believe.
PDF and one's a PowerPoint. Are you looking at PowerPoint?
Let's all go
This is the updated
to,
version
Is there
that
the
they're
page
showing
two?
there.
let's all go to the
This
PDF.
is an updated version, I guess.
This is
today.
October 2018, it just has looked different
Oh,
from
yeah.
what,
Yeah, I'm looking at the same computer.
So, just one
Today.
question. So we're gonna go over the
Updated.
presentation.
Oh, okay. I
We
don't
also have to deal
don't
with
have
the
that.
questionnaire.
Correct.
Okay, we don't have that, we got sent something else, which was the workbook.
Let's see if.
Well, all right, let's
Who
go
has
through
that?
this. And I can send anybody who doesn't have it,
Okay, all right,
Okay?
This is what's gonna be, they're proposing to present to the public.
okay.
Okay.
And so this is the presentation, the PowerPoint
Yes.
presentation? Okay, good, I'm just
Yep.
making it clear, yep.
I wanted to make it clear too, because I was following along.
So you didn't get that?
No, I didn't get that, I got
David-
something else.
David sent around.
You got a
the-
different picture on the
I
front
got
all right,
page.
so anybody who didn't get it, will get it
Second page caveat.
after we go through this.
Mhm.
I mean, you can follow along up here.
I didn't follow along, I just thought David sent it around, but I guess David sent it.
I think he sent two things today, and maybe the second, I don't know whether he got this. All right, let's go.
Okay, Sue, you driving?
Sure, okay, this is page 2 of the presentation. I guess this is a description of what they're going to cover. I can put the other one up on the screen afterward if you want. This is their PowerPoint that they will use for the presentation. Shows how, just the significantly limited options. Just
Are they gonna be doing-
Sledge has its own.
Is that what that is?
No, it's a skiway, oh, skiway and.
Skiway and hook sledge.
Yeah.
Caveats.
That's
counts. Traffic counts.
So I know we had comments that we thought this was an eye chart and they needed to be summarized, which they did not take as input, so I just think too much data, not enough summary, but we'll not edit right now.
The only thing is, what it shows is trends, but maybe it's because I'm used to looking at charts. But you can get what's happening on the roads.
Yeah, but nobody is going to be able to see that in the
I
audience.
suppose.
So is anybody being a scribe to take this down?
I'm
and
taking
feed them?
those, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Rich, okay. So that one would need to, either show what do you think, to Mike's point, would it be better shown as a, graph, instead of having the raw numbers, so that we could see a trend? Because most people aren't gonna calculate all those numbers in those locations, but maybe showing that as a graph.
There is information in there, but it's, I think graphs would show it much better.
The other is that probably some of those are not possibly good commercial locations, so that we might not want to have all of those shown, and just the ones that had something to do where we might want commercial. Like Dorchester Road, west of Franklin Hill. It's just like, those are where traffic counts have been done, but, they're not, so which of those, there's probably 3 or 4 that we could all agree should be shown to show that we have increased traffic in certain locations, and that those might be, preferable commercial locations. So the first one,
Obviously, they offered Route 10
yeah,
Right.
and the,
Well, there's another Route 10, isn't there?
Right, Route 10 south of town.
yeah,
Goose Pond Road at Hanover, is that on Goose Pond Road, or is that at the intersection with Route 10?
I think Goose Pond Road east of New Hampshire 10.
There's two, there's Goose Pond Road at Hanover and Goose Pond Road east of New Hampshire 10.
Well, we're not gonna have commercial on Goose Pond.
No, I was thinking about the intersection there, that, right at the border with Hanover.
Yeah,
I mean,
lots
that's
of cars.
just south of our
That's right, yeah.
commercial district, so that's a possible place, so that's what we need to be looking for, is like, where's there good access? Would it make sense to have commercial, and, so what are the traffic counts, and are they, accelerating or declining?
So the first Goose Pond is Hanover Road, is at Hanover Town Line, that's gotta be way east towards Goose Pond,
it was
right?
just at the,
Oh, where,
On the town
where,
line.
where
not
Rennie
Baker
Road
Hill.
comes in, I think that's where it
Yep.
is. right
No, but
there.
that's the second Goose Pond line.
Okay,
The first Goose Pond at Hanover Town Line.
uh-huh,
Yeah, that's way
Because
out.
Goose Pond Road crosses Hanover Town Line when you get towards Goose Pond.
right,
Or is
Way,
it
way
Milton
out.
Road?
Way out
I
there.
think Rennie Road is the second one, Goose Pond east of New Hampshire 10, because that one's got 1,200 cars, and the other one has peanuts, 200.
right,
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
okay, that's,
So the only ones that are applicable are Route 10.
Route 10.
Basically,
That's right.
I think the second
So
Goose, I think
everything else needs to be eliminated.
the Goose Pond at New Hampshire 10, I think, is informative, because it does tell us a lot of cars are going
Right.
by there.
So anything with Route 10. So we wanna get, that means we wanna get rid, what?
No, I just found it, Goose Pond east of New Hampshire 10 is this one here.
Yeah.
So,
we wanna get rid of Pinnacle,
right.
East Thetford,
Everything but Route 10.
yeah, Baker Hill.
Yeah, and then just show it graphically.
You wanna get rid of East Thetford? Thetford State Line, that's, is there a business development out there?
I mean, if we saw, I guess,
A lot of cars.
and,
Well,
I think
the
the other
counts
thing
are
too
off.
is people are gonna, one of the reasons to have statistics here is so that when people say, well, what about
Mhm.
East Thetford Road? We can say, yep,
Well, that's a good point. That's actually an argument for keeping some of the other roads on there as
right,
comparative.
I think,
Maybe we could highlight a couple of the important lines.
Yeah. Another public.
Yeah, and
Well, that one's at least a state road, East Thetford. So, and it is, you know, kind of mirroring the East Thetford Village, you know, so that it's like not
Mhm.
crazy out of whack.
So
In
that,
terms
is that
of-
4? The New Hampshire 10, New Hampshire 10 north of town,
Yeah,
New Hampshire 10 at Union Street. Where's the last
Yeah,
one?
right over here. Yeah,
Uh,
Goose Pond Road, east of New Hampshire 10.
Yeah,
And
and we
decided
should
to keep-
confirm that that's actually traffic on Route 10.
right.
I mean,
I think it's Goose Pond.
I think it's
It's
on
on
Goose
Goose
It's on Goose Pond.
oh,
But
okay.
we're saying
But I
that
think
that's
it's, I think
informative.
it's as soon as you turn off of Route 10 on
Right.
Goose Pond. And there's,
Yeah,
It's
You know, a
commuters.
lot of
all those
country
cars
traffic,
came
yeah.
from or are going to Route 10.
Right, it's going to Hanover, it's going to Rainy
Yeah.
Road,
Right.
basically going to Rainy
They're
Road.
going to 11,
Eleven,
bypassing.
sure, right, okay.
Hospital.
So what do you have, 4?
It looks like 4, and then the East Thetford Road at the Vermont State line.
What about the Dorchester roads? I mean, isn't that one of our districts?
Dorchester
Through
Road.
Lyme Center.
Lyme Center, that's a district, that's one
But,
of our
I
commercial
mean, do we
districts.
think that,
Honestly.
Yeah, it's a
Well-
difficult place to,
I mean,
Well, I mean, if we.
doesn't hurt to put it down. I mean, I
Put it
have no
on,
problem
put it
with it
on.
being in there.
okay,
Yeah.
let's see, I think that's west of Franklin, isn't that skiway travel? I don't know.
West of Franklin wouldn't be, because that's on the way down the
East
hill.
of Franklin.
East of
East
So
of
that'd be
Franklin.
West
east
of
of
Franklin
Franklin.
is
so,
Tanny Lake Falls.
so we got those 5 that we just said.
Mhm.
That's probably enough
Look at that number.
to say
11.
none of these are gonna support a major retail presence. And so I think people will be,
Well, no one's looking at a major retail presence.
well, right,
Well, we wanna know why we're not, and this is one of the reasons why we might not. You know, the ideal thing would also, if we had it on the graph with the 5 different lines, each of them a different color, and an inset map showing where those locations were, so people, you know, some
Yep.
people just can't
Mhm.
like visualize. That would be an informative slide to show people location,
Yep.
fringe and accounts and that.
A friendly suggestion, you could also put this on a map and color code the sections by volume.
It's, you know, if we wanna do it anytime in the next 2 years, that's. you
It's
know,
just, this is, people don't know where east of there or west of there
yeah,
is.
we'll have an inset, I think, an inset map would be
I
great.
think they may have done that.
Mhm.
All right, so are we done with this page?
Yep.
That's good news.
Huh? Did we have some- I didn't even get a chance to read it.
Says Lyme's population is older than typical for the county, and yet when you look at the map, they've corrected it. Okay.
Yeah, they corrected, they reversed it
Okay.
earlier.
There, okay.
I'm curious where 2023 comes from. That's just a projection.
It comes from the future.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, if only we could know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a projection.
Yeah, the state does those based on economic models, so it's probably what they grabbed from what the state did.
And then also on that one,
Yeah.
Descriptives.
So that doesn't have the chart on it? Because mine has a chart. This,
It's not in my packet.
does your, yeah.
not yet,
Oh, that's the next one, Mike? Is this the next one?
Um,
we'll get there, wait
This
a
one.
minute.
No,
And
this
that's- wait a
one's
second,
back.
hold on, I just got,
Go back one.
Go back to
Oh, you
13,
had
so,
that. You
Yeah.
had that
so
there.
our 13 has the chart in the PDF.
Right.
In PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
PDF.
It's just in a
This-
different order.
Oh, no, same thing, Jim.
you sent it to me, so, what is this?
There it is.
So
Just
that's,
in a
that's,
different
that's
order.
this in a different form?
Here it is.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's different.
No,
That's a different one, this is a different one. So,
The 93% residential land and buildings has a chart on the PDF. I don't know,
Slide 13.
yeah, this one is missing this chart.
Okay. Are you in the PDF?
I think I'm on the PDF.
Okay, you're in the PDF.
PDF.
I'm in the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
So the PowerPoint presentation does not have the graph.
Slide 13.
Yeah.
Weird, my PowerPoint does.
it's on 9, it's different pages and everything, so I don't understand.
Yours is on 9?
My PowerPoint, I pulled up what David sent to us today. Page 7 of the PowerPoint was the population
Yeah, the
and
Power-
the aging thing.
the PowerPoint's different.
Oh, okay, so it's just different.
Right. And then the next page, they played a minor role in supplying new housing, 61 units, 2000 to 2016.
This is this one right here.
And I think what David sent us is the workbook, all of the facts that we are supposed to be agreeing to, and this is a condensed version of the workbook, what they intended
So
to
would you
message
rather
out to
see
the
the other
public.
one?
Excuse me?
Would you rather see the other one?
No, I think this is what we're talking about, is what are we gonna go to the public with? I can look at the workbook, but what we're trying to get to is when is our presentation going to be?
Well, if we go back to page 13 of this, and it's at 93% land and buildings, then the chart that they've included, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to get from that chart.
Well, I don't think they're gonna show you, maybe somebody said that and they took the chart off, and that the message is just the 93% thing.
I'm curious how to see this. This is here, that's all there, but it's not here. I don't know.
I'm just showing the slides.
Yeah.
What's your question with the chart, Rusty? I mean,
Well, I'm not-
most of us have the chart, so you want, we can,
Well, I don't know what it's telling, what is that
What's it say?
telling me? What is that really telling me?
It just tells you what the other 7% is.
Well, no,
Yeah,
because
compares
it's
to-
residential land, and it's commercial land, and residential buildings, and manufactured housing, and so.
I think what it tells us is it compares it to Grafton County, and that Lyme's residential is a higher percentage than Grafton County's. That's
Okay,
my
in the middle,
takeaway with it.
in the middle of the page.
The blue bars are taller than the orange bars
Right.
for residential.
So residential
and for
land is-
non-residential, the orange bars are taller. That's what I get out of that.
Okay.
All right.
They were heavily residential, as it said.
93%.
We on 14? Okay.
14,
I'll just repeat one of my criticisms from the previous workbook, which is I really still don't find Grafton County as a comparison particularly compelling. And if we're doing a visioning process and considering planning, it seems to me that we should be using the regional planning district as the comparative.
In the regional district, how far south does it go?
It's all Sullivan County, so it goes down to Leominster and Ackworth, it includes New London, Newbury.
New London is in Merrimack.
That's in Merrimack, but that's how far east it goes as far north as Piermont. So it's Piermont down to Leominster, Ackworth, and, all of Sullivan County.
So it really is a market area.
Well, it doesn't,
Are
no,
these
it
figures
doesn't include
equally
Vermont,
as
but
available from that study?
is all of this,
As Grafton County numbers? Do you know?
Well, I think by town they would have it, and then someone would have to compile the data. I don't know if it's available from the planning district, but
I don't know either, I don't know what they're.
Well, you know, if you really wanted to do it and you had 6 months, to be realistic, you have to include Vermont.
Yes.
Because it's, you're basically cutting your market area in half.
Yes.
I don't know what the charge was, weren't they, I thought they were asked to do Grafton County.
There were as to do
Yeah,
Grafton County.
we didn't ask for the right thing.
Yeah, but they were asked to do Grafton County.
I mean, comparing taxes across the state line is very difficult, but, but the RPC now is all New Hampshire, but you're right about housing.
20 years ago, I did combine them.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is, it made this the second or second largest market area in the state.
Hmm.
Because what happens is, we get right up there with Portsmouth and so forth
Mhm.
when you put the.
Numbers of
both
people
together.
together, yeah.
And this was for vital communities, at the beginning of vital communities.
Mhm.
And it changes the whole meaning, particularly when you look at it from a business
Mhm.
or somebody who's thinking of coming here
Mhm.
in West Lebanon, whatever. At that point, I was at Dartmouth Printing, and so
Mhm.
it changed the.
So I guess the issue is, they were asked to do Grafton. And if we, first of all, we have the time issue, and they apparently have the budget issue. So what do we want to do with this?
Well, I mean, we don't even know, and somebody could try to find the corresponding values for the RPC region. Maybe the RPC has it and it's very available and it's easy. And then we see if it's meaningful or not. If it's not meaningful, we shouldn't make a big stink about it. But if it, I don't know, how do you, I mean, I don't know what your
Yeah.
assumptions are going into it. Do you think they're,
well, I think it's meaningful because it does do the district that we're looking at, right? The regional planning district that we would be more interested in. To me, Grafton County as a measurement includes, towns that are in Littleton's orbit, not in Hanover's orbit, and that to me is
we're in the
less
southern
valuable.
end.
Right.
Lebanon and Hanover, Grafton, going over to Enfield, Dorchester.
I mean, even if we chose something more reasonable that we could do ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
just towns in Hanover's immediate vicinity, that to me still makes more sense than doing a countywide
Mm-hmm.
comparison. But,
Just to bring up one more thing about Vermont, all you have to do is go down to White River and see the huge growth that's going on there. And I discovered buildings that were three-quarters built I never even saw before when I was there just last week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to change the whole, particularly from the industrial side.
Mm-hmm.
So just on a practical level, getting back to what Chris raised, which is the timing, what are we gonna do? We have to make a decision. We have a forum scheduled in a week.
Why don't we keep a list of our comments and edits?
I think that's what Rich
And
is.
see what it looks like when we get to the end of the
Okay.
presentation, because I suspect we're gonna have more.
Yeah, all right, so let's keep going.
This is page.
15.
Well, the question is on page, this is 15, this is 14. At least on the PowerPoint.
Yes.
And in the Upper Valley, right?
14, 15, 16.
Yep. Oh, interesting, okay.
You get to that. Problem is I'm using PowerPoint, I'm using Keynote, and they're using PowerPoint.
Okay.
That's why there's some discrepancies.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
So most people couldn't see 16 correctly.
Right.
So I have two comments on 16. One is they still put in the not equalized. which I don't think most people know what that means still.
And so that tax rate, the tax rate is the tax rate which is equalized, so.
So,
I don't know why they come up with non-equalized, because it is what they do to come up with the tax rate, they equalize it.
And I don't know the answer, what does not equalize mean?
So the only place equalized plays into it is in the county taxes and the state tax. And what they do is they, in order to share that appropriately, if our town was only assessed at 83% of market value, where another town like Orford is assessed at 95% of value, they equalize that just so that they're each the same when they calculate the county tax and the state school tax.
They use it on assessed values,
On
so to
assessed.
equalize it across the communities,
That's right.
or.
But when we get our final tax rate, which is what this chart is
Right,
showing us,
showing tax rate.
it's already been
Right.
equalized.
Right,
They-
so that, they need to change the title for that, because the assessed values really aren't equalized.
And I think it's a complication that I don't know that it's important for people to really understand that when they're looking at the tax rate. Most people are only concerned about.
Well, if you're
what the total-
comparing it to assessed values across towns, then it is, but it's not important for our own tax rate.
Right, that's my point, yeah, that's right.
So you are gonna be going from town to town, and you'll be using it, comparing, so it should all be equalized, so that you can look at a different.
The assessed values?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, but this, we're just looking at tax rate here.
And the tax rate, if they're looking at tax rates for each town,
Is this what
they're
you
all
have for
equal as
this?
tax rates. They're all been
Same.
equalized before they get to the bottom line rate.
So am I correct that it should simply say Lyme tax rate,
Yes.
leave off the words not equalized?
Right, but,
Okay.
so are there supposed to be dates at the bottom, or is that a
Yes.
time?
Yeah, the
Yes.
dates on this one.
Okay, because if, I
This
don't know,
is-
if this doesn't show, or.
It just doesn't show because I'm using tabletop, and this is Power.
Yeah, it's because of
Oh,
the,
okay,
the formatting changes.
Okay, okay, good, no, just because.
But we do have dates, right?
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that they're putting the correct data in there as well, right?
Yeah, I think they have the right.
Right, so what are we asking them to do here?
Just take off the words not equal.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay, so
the
that's it.
second comment I have on that slide is, again, you see trends, but you don't know, because you can play with the left-hand, what is the actual increase percent over the 10 years? So it's a one bullet on each slide.
I don't follow, could you explain this?
Well, if you, I mean, you can change this, and this can look however you want, just on what scale you play on the left-hand side. So it's much more informative, and I get it, it's a trend, but, you know, is that a 4% a year? Is it a 40% over 10 years? Just a bullet saying, you
Oh,
know,
what
what the
those
actual
trends are.
trend means
Sure.
in one bullet for each graph.
Is that
think that's good.
in the other slide that they're gonna talk from? The other part of the presentation? Next. No. It's number 17.
I think John's comment about comparing the Grafton County is equally applicable
All the way through.
here, yeah. The other comment I had is the tax burden should not be, the basis should not be per unit, it should be per property. There's lots of tax-paying properties that are not residential units. Why are they excluded from the denominator in all these calculations? And you can see that on some of the later slides. There's a lot of, they're dividing by the 777 housing units, and that's just not the right comparison. It's not the right baseline.
What should the base be?
Oh, they're comparing, when we're comparing, we can talk about it when we get into the later scenarios, but in the later scenarios, we're showing how different potential developments will affect the tax burden, and they're only allowing it, essentially allowing it to affect the tax burden for residential units. But there are lots of other tax-paying
Okay,
properties that may be
I-
included. They're just leaving, you're only putting the residential in the denominator when they per
I think
per
they
property.
put it here, I mean, we know that this is just talking about residential tax burden, so I think that's loud and
Okay,
clear.
residential tax burden for you? Okay.
Yeah, so I think that that's legit to say.
Okay,
I
okay.
agree, Grafton County, many depressed housing markets compared to ours, but, you know, so that it's hard to compare, but that is our county.
Just as a public question, are we trying to make the point that by using words like tax burden and 3 times the county average and comparing it to markets that would be naturally lower than ours because of their socioeconomic neighborhood, are we trying to make that point?
No, I think their charge was to compare it to Grafton County.
Right. But I mean,
Their
is
objective.
it
they've got no
a tax
access.
burden or is it the tax responsibility?
I don't know, I mean, that's semantics.
Well, tax burden is an economic term that I don't know, I have to agree in some sense that I think it's misused here, but I don't know that, to your point, John, I don't know that it actually matters if you call it tax responsibility.
I don't have a problem if it was called tax responsibility, it's fine with me.
What, I'm just wondering, because I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is the point we're trying to,
Okay, the selectmen asked the community development group to try to expand the tax base because I believe you used the term tax burden is too high. So all this is doing is saying, you know, how high is it compared to Grafton County?
and your point about the comparative grouping is that by comparing it to Grafton County, we're going to be inclined to be higher because of the comparative group.
Well, we're gonna be higher than
We're gonna be higher than a lot
a lot
of
of
places.
people.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even if we did the broader region, we're gonna be
Yeah.
on the high side.
Right.
But not as high as if what we see here is Grafton County.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we added Sunapee and all those
And
places,
New London,
it would really change.
They've got a huge tax base though,
yeah.
huge, because those lakes
Right.
generate a
Oh,
lot of.
seasonal revenue.
I mean, that's
Seasonal
the
revenue,
difficulty
exactly.
with trying to find comparative. You generally end up with apples and oranges.
Right.
But I think the purpose of using Grafton County or a larger thing is just to get a sense.
It's the baseline.
Yeah, just to get a sense, but we're really, almost all the towns are unique. And so are we.
And if we, to your point, if we actually can gather additional data in the weeks coming, we can always add a third row to all of these, which would be what is the term you use for the,
Well, there's the regional planning commission area, but, you know, whether or not that's as odd or as skewed as, you know, the rest, but we don't know, I mean, because I don't have familiarity with the numbers right now.
Vicki, where does Claremont fall in the region?
So that's in RPC, our Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, it's in Sullivan County, Newport, Charlestown, and they've got very different bases,
Very high
you know,
tax rates.
and very high taxes,
Low assessments.
very low assessments. You can get a house for a song in Claremont.
There's a reason for that, too.
I understand, and yes.
Okay.
okay,
All
so
That's
point
not
made,
overall
Yeah.
fraction.
we may have,
Oh, I'm not trying to make, I was just trying to understand if there's an underlying message that we're trying to convey.
we're trying to convey no message.
Okay.
The consultant was told to use Grafton, and those are the consultant's words. We're assuming they're unbiased.
Okay.
I mean, this is data, it's not, they're not expressing an opinion.
What is ESRI based on, US Census and Community Survey?
ESRI is the Geographic Information Service. ESRI does the GIS mapping. And so I think that's a data source that they use.
Okay. So that comes back to this other chart, where they use that same median household income, but it doesn't refer to that source of data. I was curious, actually, going back to that page, this was back to
Page what?
page 12, where they just had median household income and median, so they, basically they're using that same median home value in 218, that's the same number they carried over here. So I just was curious
So we can
where
ask
that
them
number,
to
where that
supply
number comes
sources
from.
for each of the pages.
Yeah, it's not that hard for us to get them the actual 218 grand list, and they can pull the median value off the grand list. I don't know where this data comes from, and I doubt whether we sent them.
See, there it is, Asbury based on the census.
Right.
Yeah, they've done some really interesting geographically based stuff, and you can get it on the web. And
Yeah.
it's all based on US Census, which is the best available information we have, unless we generate it ourselves by our people counts, or
Right.
we know what our median income is, because it's not self-report, or, sorry, median
Okay.
house value is, because we have the grand list.
Yeah, I mean, we've checked our median house value, and
Yeah.
it's pretty
And they,
consistent.
I was actually skeptical of their number, and,
I think I got
They were-
45, right, so it was.
Pretty good.
Especially because that's self-reported, that's what you say on your census form about what the value of your house is, not like what the town actually says what it is.
Oh, is that
So
right?
that's what, look, the US Census asks
Right.
you what median value, like what the value of your house is, and then they put them all together and pick the median for town of Lyme or Grafton
I
County
see.
or whatever. So it's surprising that they're close, because people will
Yeah.
underestimate and overestimate,
Right.
and, you know,
Yeah.
depending on.
I
what
guess the
they-
lesson is there's enough people that underestimate, the equivalent
Yes.
to
Right.
that overestimate.
Yes.
Self-correct.
It's self-correct.
Yeah,
all right, so we're on 18?
yeah.
I have the same comment on this, over the 10-year period, put total rate of increase.
And does this include like our warrants and stuff like that? Or is this just, do we know?
This is the tax rate, which does include everything.
Okay, so this is the, okay.
This is the actual,
So we're
just
gonna-
charting our tax rate.
We're gonna drop non-equalized.
Yes.
In the top and the bottom too, there's a note at the bottom about it.
You got that, Rich? About
Yes,
the
I got it.
I'd be curious to know from them why they even put that there. I mean, I don't understand where they're
Ask
getting
them.
that and why, it seems quite important to them.
We asked the question on the first time it presented, and it's stayed in there for 3
Well, maybe
iterations.
they have a reason.
Right, I don't understand it, but.
Okay, we're on 19. So basically, is it right that we're flat going, you know, we have that spike and then we're back down, is that what that's showing?
Yeah, but the side, it's a percentage, right?
It is.
Yeah, and so it's showing the percentage of capacity, or showing the capacity in the school, and then we went over capacity, if they say 100%, I don't really understand.
No, it's equalized, so 2008 is 100%, so
Right.
everybody's starting from
Okay.
100%. So if we go from 2008 to 2012, what is that? That's a 10% increase in Lyme School, right?
Right.
From
Right.
100% to almost 9%.
Yeah, so last year we graduated a big class, so we were probably, it depends if they're using if they're using state, they're probably using state data, so that's an October 1 number, so that's close. I think we were a little bit higher than we were in 2008, but
We're back to our 2008 enrollment numbers.
yeah, just about, within
Okay.
about 2 or 3 students.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. So we're flat. All right, so we're on 20?
Considering that the R is, the total growth between whatever their number was in 2008, I don't know what the number was, but the difference between that and the spike is probably 7 students?
How many?
10%.
7?
Trying to think.
What's total enrollment?
What's that?
What is total enrollment?
It's 100, right now it's 195.
So 10% is 20 students.
Right.
Well, we don't know if this includes.
We have 100 high school students, right? 100.5, they say.
Yeah, oh, so you were asking me, total, like district,
Total, yeah.
total districts?
Yeah.
I should have brought my computer.
Two some pool.
Yeah, because let's say we've got 100 students, 100 high school students. I don't remember what it was in
They say
2008.
100.5.
Yeah.
Oh, so the figure the 100 person was just K through 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here it is, 194 is right.
Yep.
Okay, 94,
Plus another 100, so we have 294.
294. So the prior chart, was that total enrollment or just K through 8?
It just showed percentages, so the
Oh, just
left was just a
percentages.
percentage, so.
But of it must have been total then.
Yeah, percentage of, well, I don't know, it could have been K-8, it could have been K-12, I don't know.
The next
Till I tell you-
chart,
till I tell you
which
what
they
that R
pulled,
is.
is this one here, which shows 8 grades.
What page is that?
This was
21.
Okay, so we're not-
16 and 17, which are right next to each other in what the chart I'm using,
Okay,
or the package that I'm using.
so we're on 21. So Lyme has a high 17% of the population. It's just that's K through 8. That's not right? That's not,
Yes, K through 8, they say that.
Yeah, it says we came through the pool.
okay, so it's just K through 8. Well, I don't understand why
They didn't do the
they
survey.
don't do the total. Is there any
Because
reason?
we're paying for it.
I mean, Isn't it?
But it says.
I think it probably makes sense that they're doing K, because that's what we can control. That's our controllable cost, K is our controllable cost, whereas 9 through 12 is a bill, we don't set the tuition.
Yeah, but just
That
for,
doesn't
just
matter, but it's-
informationally, it's not complete to have just K through 8.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe it's hard to get the information for the other schools, because of the way they
Well,
district
I
or
think at the
something.
first meeting, we talked about all of the school stuff should be
Mhm,
all the way through.
mhm.
So maybe we could ask them about that, Rich.
It seems kind of crazy, if we're so old, how is Romney getting away without being the oldest community in the state with only 7% of, K through 8 kids? That's kind of weird. We shouldn't be so old, unless we've got really old parents, I guess we've got old parents.
Yeah, but everyone are old.
Well, I'm just trying to
We
understand.
just don't die fast enough.
We're still reproducing late in life, I guess that's
I'm
it.
aging faster than my age.
So if we go back to 20, did anyone have any comments on 20,
When,
What is 20?
which one?
this one?
I think we went over that, didn't we?
My comment is I think there's too much information on that one slide, and nobody in the public's gonna be able to get it all.
Yeah,
Unless-
that's a tough-
unless-
that's a
Unless
tough
they talk to each point and point out the Lyme thing.
Well,
and
he did
stuff.
say in his email, when he sent this, is that what they were sending was, you had requested the power, or whatever, what did you request?
The forum
The forum
Slides.
presentation,
Yep.
slides.
last week.
But what they said in the email was that it's gonna be misleading because it's not gonna include what I'm gonna talk about.
Because he's gonna talk around some
He's
of
gonna,
this stuff.
yeah, so it's, I mean, it's, we're looking at, what we're looking at now is essentially what he's gonna use as a starting point for what he's gonna
Mhm.
talk about. So it's misleading when we look at these to say, well, I don't know what this
Oh,
is.
so he may not even be showing this.
No,
No,
he'll be showing it,
But he'll
but
explain
he's,
it.
Okay,
the
yeah,
whole
explain it,
point
yeah.
is
Yeah,
that this is not the presentation.
right, yes, yes.
Yeah, he'll explain
So,
what that
Right.
means.
In his email, when he sent this, he emphasized the fact that this is not going to really do us
Right.
a whole lot of good because he's not here.
Okay, so the feedback is, there's a lot of stuff on this, unless he's walking people through it, there's too much, and it should be divided out into 2 slides, or,
And I'd argue the third piece of data on this slide
isn't worth it.
isn't worth it.
Which one is that?
Equalized evaluation per pupil.
How are you gonna use this information?
Well,
How-
so that's where, so the occupied units, again, I don't know where the source data comes from, but when you're dealing with the numbers that we're talking about here, come up with a 0.27. My count was like 780 units, if we're gonna call them living units.
I mean, later in the presentation, he used units, I think it was 777, I don't know the two definitions, where the.
705,
Yeah, but later in the presentation, it says.
777, remember that.
777.
Okay, so vacant and
So that's why,
seasonal
you know,
are different
2.27,
than
I'm like, what is
occupied.
that?
So,
Okay.
guys,
I
the census
understand.
has it into, they're vacant and seasonal are not occupied units. So we could have all those houses that you can count, but
Well, right,
This
remember
is the
when
occupied number.
Eric, when we did the count, we found all these
That's-
houses without people
So
or
it's
not
based on,
livable.
again, the
So is it
census.
what's the right number to use here?
705 is the census number, you're saying?
No, I'm saying the census has three numbers for, when we count all of our dwelling units, occupied units, vacant units, and seasonal are the three components of total dwelling units. So 777 is probably the total, those are the occupied, because we've got vacant and seasonal. And it's a snapshot, you know, whenever the census is taken, some that are vacant could be like the person died and it's on the market, therefore it's vacant. But that's just how it is when you gotta like, here's my snapshot.
And one person's seasonal could be another person's, you know, full-time
You're right,
occupation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility. It's real, I mean, when we went through it, we did it by how is it being used now?
And like so much of this, it just, you've gotta stick your pin in somewhere. and
Exactly.
This is where we
Right.
stuck our pin.
So I also,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think comparing the elementary cost per student to a statewide average is misleading because, you know, small towns like Lyme obviously have nowhere near the scale of large cities. So comparing that 15.4 to 26 is, I don't know what story that tells us.
But is that just 20? Did it line
It's
cost?
Yeah, 2650.
Yeah, okay.
Especially when the disclaimer is probably the most informative piece of the data that's presented, the disclaimer being that the cost per student is similar to some other small New Hampshire communities. So if the title is cost per pupil is high, then it should at least say cost per pupil is higher than the state average. I mean, that's what that data is telling us. It's not telling us that the cost per pupil is high.
Yeah, it's actually, well, there are note tells us that compared to similar communities, it's.
Well, and we have from last year's slideshow, we have where we rank relative to other K-8 schools with towns our size. So if that's data that you want, I can shoot you a slide that provides that. We're about third from the bottom in K-8 schools and towns of equivalent that we see as peer groups.
Again, this is again, that they're using K through 8. Yeah, I don't know why they're always using K, I mean, that's a problem I have, is why always K through 8? We have fiscal responsibilities K through 12.
Mhm.
22?
But I think can you go back one to the, I mean, so we have high school, does the overall picture change?
I don't know. I mean, that's what, how do I know?
I mean, I don't either, my guess would be no, right?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, what's the first?
What would you- what
This
would
is
you-
only-
what would you
If
guess?
we're complaining,
I-
this is K to
I would
8,
agree
we have
with
high
you.
school, and yet, how does it change the
There's no way for us to
picture?
know
I
without.
know, we don't know, but
I can tell you what it is relative to Lyme, but I don't know how that translates all the way down onto all those other towns. I would imagine, to your point, that is fairly equivalent, because each of those schools is educating the four grades. And unless suddenly they say, well, we're gonna fund our high schools much, much better than our lower schools, then there might be a different proportional value. But I would think that it would probably be fairly consistent, just in terms of the trend.
But this is just numbers, right?
yeah, but Jeff's saying that
Kids.
if they underfund their high school, then the
Yeah.
high school kids might move out, right? Which we think is
Or if
probably
they're,
not gonna happen on a large
or
scale.
if they're really wealthy, they send all their kids to private school,
schools.
that's not there.
Right.
That's true.
So, my other question, which I sent you on this, was where they get the math, 17% of population. Well, if I do the math backwards, we start with 194 K through 8 students. Do the math backwards, that comes up with 1141 as our population, and our population is
Maybe they-
17, almost 2,000.
Maybe they have high school in there and the K-8 is just wrong.
So something's wrong, the population's wrong, but even if you did that, now we drop down to more like the 12% instead of the 17%.
You know what it might be, guys? The 14% could be our high school, the 17% could be our K-8.
No,
No, that's
each
Lisbon.
bar is a
That's
town,
Lisbon.
but you can't see
It's a
them here.
different-
Oh, you can't
It's the
see the other
full-
towns?
It's the full enrollment, Rusty. You're
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
okay.
So they're using 294, not 194,
So
so
this-
two,
The subtitle's wrong. It shouldn't say K-8, it should say school.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah.
It should say K-12.
I don't know.
Yeah, is that the right number?
yeah.
Wait,
It's just the subtitle, the K-8 enrollment should just say
no,
K-12.
no, that, I mean, so I'm looking, I'm looking at the same chart here, I'm using PowerPoint. And the first one is Romney, the second is Holderness.
Right.
Third is Lincoln, fourth on mine is Ashton, I'm sorry, Ashton, Grafton, Orford, Warren, Bath, Woodstock,
Lisbon.
and Lyme. So these are
Different towns.
different, each of these is a different town.
Yes.
We agree on that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But what,
But if
what,
you
We are
But if
all
you use the
agreeing.
K, if you use K through 12, that's the 294.
Right.
And if you use
so,
17%,
so
that's
the subtitle is wrong.
K through 12.
Right.
So that's, you gotta put that in your notes.
This is
It shouldn't be K through 8, it should be school enrollment.
So the question is, are they all
It's the same.
school age?
It's the same.
I have no idea.
Right, that's the question.
So-
And if it's truly K through 12 for each of those bars, then
So
they should
that's the
change the legend.
question,
Yes.
yeah, if that's the case.
But really all you're looking at here is a trend. That's really all you're gleaning from this, right?
This isn't.
Well, it's not a trend, it's this
It's
is.
comparative, but comparative.
Yeah.
Comparative,
Right, exactly. I mean.
The point they're
somehow-
making is that we have more students per household,
Yes.
occupied household than other towns.
That's right.
Right.
And the second point is we spend more than the state average. So those are the
Right.
2 points in the
Yep.
last 3 slides.
Right. Yep. We have more kids, we spend more, and we have a small denominator.
Okay, we're on the big picture.
Does anyone like this slide?
I don't know what, well, what's it about?
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I think it's impossible for us to look at the slide
And know what he's
and
gonna
know,
say.
because he's gonna be up there referring to it.
But,
It's what he says.
If he wants to talk about it in some ways,
And
that's
that's
fine
the-
with me. He's the one who has to stand up there in front of it.
Yeah, I mean,
But if there's a conclusion that he wants us to draw on a presentation, it should say,
This is
or
what
be
it is.
highlighted, or, I mean, you shouldn't have to stare at the slide and wonder what it's trying to tell you.
Has he given you a summary report of his findings?
yeah,
No. All right. And does that explain it, does that answer some of why he has those conclusions? Is that slide?
you mean, why, what's in here?
Well, you guys have seen his conclusions, you look at that slide, does that slide say, oh, well, that's why, this is some of the information of why he's
I
drawn that
think it's a
conclusion?
piece, yeah, it's a piece of what the
Well, see,
conclusion
we're
is.
getting to the conclusions, which are looking at the scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
that,
so he's just establishing costs
Yeah.
and tax implications of certain things, and then we look at the impact scenarios to see, what we're looking at is land use futures and comparing which would be better for our tax situation of them all.
I mean, I don't, to your question, Chris, I don't understand what this,
You done with that one?
what this slide shows. No, I'm not at all happy with this slide.
This big picture slide, we're still on that, right?
Yeah.
This is one that we're looking at is slide 22, called the big picture.
Right.
This is kind of interesting to say, certain amount of municipal, certain county, local education, state education, to come up with a 9.3 number. I think that's useful to say, so like, the town needs to raise something like 9.3, where's it, you know, where's it going, what's it being spent on? I think the tax valuation column maybe is interesting. I don't have a clue why there are those two columns.
Probably just to
At the
show
top.
where they came up with it.
Well, no, there's estimated revenues and actual revenues, and so that's the difference between what's budgeted and what actually comes in, so it's like, you know, and
But
so
they're,
there
you
are
know,
differences.
they're not interestingly different. I don't
know
find them interesting to.
Okay, well, then maybe we should just have the actuals, right?
I don't think it really matters, he's gonna be standing up there, he's gonna be just talking, this is gonna be background to what he's talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
And he'll point to certain things,
Yes.
and he'll say what he has to say.
I mean, if he's trying to say that budgeting is a art, not a science, we could
Yeah.
get that from here, but, yeah. So,
And we would believe it.
yes, we would.
Yes, we
We
will.
would.
So the other one is what he breaks out, less county portion, and then he says, local and state education. Well, that's includes the municipal, not just local and state education. So it looks like he's doing the local and state education, those are two components, which is only $17, $18. And you take out the $7.15, which is the municipal, so he didn't title that $25
Properly.
I don't think so, I mean.
Well, then, rather than saying, then let's not say you did it wrong, let's ask him
Yeah,
if that's an accurate number, the local and state education. Tax rate, you're talking about the tax rate.
yeah, down there where it goes to 25, 28, and again, it's a talking point, I suppose, I don't know what he's gonna say about that.
No idea.
I have no idea where he's
This
going.
is the background to what you'd be talking
But
to.
he hasn't actually spoken, he hasn't given a
No,
presentation.
no,
He does it
No.
He's
No,
gonna
he-
do it
we're-
in a
we-
forum.
We
and
would
the
see
town
the
forum.
presentation.
At the same time.
Yeah, which frankly, I mean, it's a good thing because, or it's potentially a good thing. The whole idea of having a consultant is that, you know, they should be checked and everything should be accurate, but they're really going up there not as our proxies, they're going up there because they did the research and they're standing behind it.
Mhm.
And they give the presentation and everybody, including us, can, you know, throw vegetables and oranges and stuff.
Right,
But they're, you know, it's their,
Right, they have experience working with a lot of communities, and there's a depth of knowledge working with other municipalities, so you get anecdotal stuff about how they found this tax situation in other towns. I mean, this is something that they do and like doing.
but it's a way to keep, you know, us, the LCDC and the planning board from, you know, being the facilitators. We shouldn't be the
Or
facilitators.
showing bias in
Yeah.
any way, this is like the objective numbers that
This is
have
who
been-
we got.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna speak to the other side, that I really do want to have them get up there and not have us saying, just a minute, is that 705 houses or at 777? And, you know, the best of all possible worlds would be for us to feel very comfortable that
I
we
think what we're
stand
doing
behind these
tonight
numbers.
is a good thing to get them to
Okay.
have their numbers, but ultimately, we've sent them a lot of comments, and they give us the same message every time, which is that they must be pretty comfortable with their numbers and that they're willing to defend them. So be it.
I guess,
Slide
although,
23.
yeah.
I'm sure that they're also gonna say, okay, so here's the degree of variability. This is what we
Oh,
think.
they, I think one of their opening things is, when they, I think it was their application or something, but at some point, they or one of the other applicants said, this is an art.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get a bullseye from anybody.
But we've got a format where, and none of these development scenarios are ones we like, we can crank in other ones that we might like and, you know, run it through the same kind of economic analysis, because they've given us this format. factors that we can use.
Well, even if they have in the presentation, we can punch in other scenarios in 5 minutes ourselves. There's nothing hidden. So this is the slide where that I was talking about. It's broken up into 5 slides in the presentation I have, but this is the slide where we're talking about any savings, tax savings or additional tax burden from a particular development being spread over per unit, and it should be spread over all tax-paying properties in the state and
That
the
makes
town.
sense, makes sense to me.
If we save some tax money, it's not just housing units that pay less taxes, it's everybody.
So the
Everybody
term,
who owns town.
for Rich's
Everybody who owns property.
sake, we're asking them, instead of housing units, we want,
Divided by 7, no, it's how many property owned, how many.
So the best way to do this is
properties.
to take so the first column there, the net revenue is sort of their proposed tax saving from this 311,800. Just take that as a percentage of the town budget.
Yep.
And that's what each house, each property, and that would
Each
be the
property.
percentage. It would be 1%, 2%, whatever, that's
Do
what
you
each
have that,
property
Rich?
owner would save on their bill.
So display it
Because
not as,
And the other problem with this is that 400 is not gonna be the same for every taxpayer. Right?
Right.
The higher your tax bill, the higher the savings, the lower your tax bill,
Right.
the lower your savings.
So it's a percentage would be
So
better.
expressing those percentages is much more important
and that should be a percentage of the,
of the total.
Of the total, so
town
total
budget.
311 divided, or into the total, percentage of the total budget.
Well, what it was 9, 3.
And then,
okay.
So it's gonna be
Yeah.
0.32.
what it is.
Right, because I think a lot of people would look at this and they'd say, well, I'm gonna save $400, but it's not
No.
the way it's gonna be.
Only if every one of our properties was valued the same amount.
Right.
Right.
0.32%, you're saying, right? So-
so you got both of those things?
I have,
Well, doesn't that, don't you multiply that by 50?
No, this is total.
No, this is total.
Total,
So this
So the
is,
net revenues would be 311.
yes,
yes.
which is
So
not inconsiderable.
That should be a percentage that's gonna reduce the overall tax.
So on a $9 million budget, it's 0.3%.
Well,
Right,
You said 3%, right?
No,
Point-
point
point
three.
0.3%.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry, point
So it'll save each taxpayer 0.3%.
There's a
of their
difference.
tax bill.
But just to make sure we're getting it, you got both of those things, Rick?
So that the tax benefits, I mean, what I heard was tax benefits should be spread over all property owners. And I think, Eric, your point is the way to do that is just to display that as a percentage of
Total town budget.
total town budget, as opposed to,
I think that's a better way to do it.
yeah,
This is very.
I apologize, 3%.
Okay, 3%.
Well, 0.3 times 100 is 0.3, is 3%. 3% of your tax bill is what you're saving.
No, well, no, or is it 0.3%,
No,
which is
it's
0.003?
It's,
Well,
it's 3.3% or 0.3.
if it were
3%
$10 million.
3% is 0.03.
0.03, sorry.
Three,
So 0.03.
yeah.
0.03, right,
Just
3%.
he actually.
That's
he
pretty
did.
Yeah, which is
Chris,
what
is
you
that
said.
is that the math that you just did, right?
3.2, it's 0.032.
I misspoke, you know, on a $9 million budget, 300K is approximately 3%.
3%.
Okay. Right, 300,000 out of 10 million.
Okay, we got that? And you're
And I
all
like it,
set?
I think that's a nice way to get everyone then immediately take your tax bill and figure out what 3% is.
3%.
$10,000.
300.
so the one thing I want to point to here though is their assumptions, and this goes back to where they were doing the per unit and the students and, because
Yeah.
they pick out of 50 units, they say 13 students, well, that's that 0.26 number that they came up with. So they're using that as a multiplier to then come down to the budget for high school. And again, I don't really know how much is cost for elementary, middle school, and then high school. The 13 students in the first column.
Can we get that slide put back up so there's consistency?
Yeah, so, right there, you got it, yeah, yeah.
Does
So,
it break
so
it down?
basically they took those, oh, I see, high school, okay, it's not printed here. Wow,
Yeah.
13 and 6, wow, that's even higher than,
Well, the different
so that's like
scenarios.
0.38, so,
But the next column is the same development with different rates
a
of.
much higher
Children.
school population out of that. So basically, they took our existing school population figures, and then they said, well, no, it's gonna be higher than that.
They did both, right?
Why
They
is it
did-
gonna
they
be
said a
higher?
current and a
They
higher.
said.
Why would they be
one,
higher, and why wouldn't
because
it be lower?
It could be higher. I thought, I mean, I asked them to do current and, actually, I think it'd be nice if they did current, higher, and lower, so that we had three scenarios.
Right, because one of the things, and they do in here put condo, so there they've got 8. Now, where they come up with that, I don't know, but down here in
Well,
Gillette.
basically, they're coming up with the numbers that they believe in, is what I'm, what I,
Well, but John, we need to understand those numbers, and I think that's, given that we all know that the number of kids in homes is an important factor in our tax rate. I mean,
yeah.
no kidding.
Well,
We need to
that's
understand
why,
that.
that's why I think that multiple scenarios for each,
Exactly, because everybody's
Yeah.
gonna have a different opinion.
that's right.
Well,
Having
but we
multiple
have the
scenarios.
numbers. Rusty
Yeah, but-
has the data. We know how many kids are in the full panoply.
But we didn't
of-
hire
You never know
Rusty,
who's
we
gonna
hired
be with
them.
new development.
We hired them, and what I would like them to do is multiples for each.
Predicting who
And
comes in
I
is
asked them, but they
incredibly
were
imprecise.
interested.
Yes, but we have a little bit of ballpark numbers. And we do know the population of the kids as they stand today.
That's the current,
That's
There is no-
the
that's the
first
current.
column, that's
That's what
current.
they did, yeah.
They did the
Well,
current.
but that's just a broad brush average. We already know we have a lot of old people that almost certainly have 0 kids in their school.
But
So
they're included in the
They're-
average.
But I don't believe the average makes a difference, and certainly, I think there's gonna be far fewer families in $250,000 homes, fewer children in $250,000 homes than in the 450. And they've just got in the current.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure I agree with that.
I think it's the
Yeah.
opposite, yeah.
I think one thing we have
Even
to
families can't
acknowledge
afford
is
it.
that there's a lot of differing opinions,
Well,
and it's the
that's-
reason we hired them.
Then,
And if we want to get a better idea of what they're saying, we're gonna have to hire them to come back, we're gonna have to pay them to come back and spend an evening with us going over the numbers.
But so let me put it this, if you want a column, you have current, you have higher. If you want lower, let's just say instead of 13 and 6, let's cut it in half. You just cut the benefit in half.
And the other thing that I
It's
think.
easy to do that math.
The other thing that plays into this is, when you're talking about development, how much of that development is going to be used as rental property versus ownership? Because one thing we do know is that over the lifespan, or over a generational lifespan of a house, when it's owned, it will educate fewer students than when it's rented. So, that's part, when I
So
think.
how do we that's hard to tell when somebody's gonna rent it.
But that's,
Well-
that's included in the townwide average of
That's right.
whatever.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is in terms of zoning or whatever controls you have over development, if there are some levers that talk about, okay, so is the purchase of your home, is it an investment home, or is it something like that? I don't know. But-
That's tough to,
So I'm not making any statement other than the variable here.
you're right about that.
To, so,
Yeah.
I don't know how you calculate that in there, or if there are any controls over the type of development that's being done.
Not when it comes to, people are just free to do what they want.
Like condos, if there were condos built, can they be condos that are, they have to designate that these condos are
Not
gonna be
that
owned?
could be done through zoning, I suppose that the condo association could make
The
rules,
developer makes rules.
but not that the
So the
town.
town
is a-
can't say, we're not gonna approve, development of rental condominiums.
No.
Okay.
Or we can do age restricted.
We can do age
Yeah,
restricted.
we can do senior.
Yeah, we can do seniors.
Well, Unless you count for the fact that apparently we're getting older and having kids, that is one way to restrict.
Our seniors are,
No,
for-
what I see in my friends, I mean, everybody's selling their home and moving out. I
Right.
mean, I was able to sell my house and downsize, but not everybody, wants a dumpy little place,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I think
you get-
one,
But I think there's faster turnover. I mean, so many of my friends have moved out of town, because they can get they sell their home here for a lot of money to a family with kids,
right.
and they get a great house some other place, and,
It's much smaller and
Well, that's
easier
what I
to
was saying,
get.
because there's a
Well,
trend, I think, as seniors leave,
Yeah.
that now, for instance, at the top of Pinnacle Hill, we have Ally Farrar's house, it
Yep.
just sold, and there's 2 kids.
Right,
Paul and Joyce Killebrew are leaving, and their son's moving in with 2 kids.
right.
Um,
I sold my house.
Peter
with 2
Coburn is
kids.
leaving, and Rebecca's coming with 3 kids. So we have 7 kids within half a mile
Right,
this year.
I also think if we're talking about who's moving into new units in development, here we have lots of families moving into relatively high-priced homes, if I know the area, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's a
And,
pretty nice
you know,
neighborhood.
If you make homes more affordable, you're probably gonna get more families, which is what we're talking
You
about.
talk about rental properties, the rental properties at Pond View. Low affordable housing, no kids.
yeah, that's a bit of an anomaly, and it's been that, it's been, because it has been for years.
So how is it anomalous?
Because
I'm
it's
curious.
because it's anomaly being, it's a singular instance. I don't think you'll
Let's
find
ask,
another
let's
instance.
ask the landlord if they rent to people with kids, if they have a choice.
Yes,
They do.
they do,
I don't know.
they do, we asked.
Yeah, it is true,
But
over
they're
the years.
mostly single bedroom, is what they told us.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of them
Have
are
some
single.
two-bedroom.
Yeah, it's
There have been
an
families that
anomalous
have
place,
lived.
and it's been
Yeah,
consistently
kids from
very
the-
low. I don't know that there's ever been a kid in
Not-
there.
not
Well,
that
I've
there
actually
is.
seen them.
David Robbins, when he started off work, he lived there,
Right.
and I don't think there were ever kids there.
Well, no,
You
just
just
say
say
that.
Oh, there were kids?
There have been families that have lived
Oh,
there,
there
but,
have-
but certainly, I mean, I think there's what, 13 units or something like
Yeah,
that?
I think it's 13, 15?
15?
15.
Very, very low.
Yeah, there've been
student
like-
rate.
Maybe a
It's
handful
unusual.
over a decade.
But so's our own,
Very
if
transparent.
you use our highest density developments in the town, you've got Pondview, you got 85 Dartmouth College Highway, I mean, I guess we can use the condo, on the common.
Right, the one right across from the cemetery, you got 2 units there,
Yeah.
3
okay.
units? I don't know.
They say 3, I thought it was 4, but I have to double check that, but it's on the
There's
tax.
one with 4.
But anyhow, I picked those 3, and, I mean, Dartmouth College Highway, 85 there's no kids there.
How can you afford it though? I mean,
Well-
they're really expensive for what you get.
But it's the same as buying a foreign, we're buying houses around here for that same price, so.
Yeah, you get some privacy, you can, scream at your kid and nobody's gonna go, oh my God, they're bad parents.
As
and
far
you-
as a unit though, I'm just like
Well,
looking at
to
it
your
from a
point,
living
I
space.
take your point, but there's no telling, who's gonna move it.
This is why we have different scenarios.
Exactly.
So we can
Yes.
And that's
see-
why multiple scenarios I think are a good idea.
And if we wanted to put a lower for each one of those, we could take the half, I think that's a very generous lower. And just see what the impacts are there. And, if we wanna have a lower earn and a higher, that's fine.
It seems to me that the answer, what they're saying is somewhere between what I think I'm hearing from 2 different perspectives, which is you add more housing, you add more housing that's gonna increase the cost, increase taxes because of school-aged children, and that being the largest driver of cost. But in their scenarios, they're saying, actually, there's a modest savings. So it's-
There could be, I mean, they're,
So,
So it's really, we're saying, it's something in between the two, but probably not to the extreme that
it's
either
ballpark,
one.
yeah.
Right, so it's not gonna be like it's transformative in lowering our taxes, but it's also not gonna necessarily be transformative in terms of
Raise
the
Blowing
cost
us out of the
going
water.
through the roof.
Right. The only thing I would say is that,
No?
that when you're talking about, I'm sorry? Were you?
No, just going on this point, what I don't think that slide particularly conveys well is the risk, right? we don't know where those 13 kids are landing in our K-8 school. If they land in 4
Well, that's,
straight
and,
grades.
and when you
So-
came in, we talked about that, and that's a very good point.
And so what I would hope that, at least in narrating that slide, the consultants will do is compare that 3% savings against the massive risk that we could face.
I think that's
Could
such a
you go
good
back to
point.
that slide for a minute? I mean,
Well, the other is that we run, there's a ceiling in the number of kids that we can accommodate, and the whole thing looks very different if we trigger a needed addition to the school.
Well, that, I mean, what Jonathan was saying, and what Jeff, what you said when you came into the planning board, we went over the scenarios where if it didn't land right,
But they're, I mean, if you look at because the high school costs are per
Fixed.
kid, that's,
Fixed.
the middle school elementary cost is, and they don't show it on this one, but they show it in other slides. They're estimating $2,900 per additional kid, so that 36.3 you see in the first column is 13 times the $2,900.
Yeah.
And that goes across for 1338, 1338. But, you know, my reaction is to have 38 new elementary school K-8 kids and only spend $108,000 more
impossible.
is crazy.
yeah.
It's
There's no
impossible.
way that's gonna happen.
Right.
I mean, I would
And-
say
and we're
even.
and if we're trying to control costs, we're then expecting, what are we expecting the town to do at future school board meetings with the budget? People are gonna go crazy because there's 30 kids in their kids' class, and they're gonna want to split them, and they're gonna want a bigger school, whatever. So there's
13
a
we can-
lot embedded in here
Yeah,
that we're not
so
talking about.
13, we could, it could either be, if it's distributed well, could be no money.
Right.
Distributed poorly, it could be
That-
$180,000.
For another
So-
teacher, another class.
Another 2 teachers.
So, the element of risk is not really being addressed.
But
Because
38,
38, I mean, that could be-
38.
38 is disaster.
It could be $500,000,
I'll tell you
right?
that, having, I mean, you know this too, Jeff, 38 would be a disaster.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're getting 7 more this year, right off.
So,
And the hard part is that, as you mentioned that's 7 that's not gonna show up in the state numbers, because they're all gonna be after October 1st.
Right.
So when people like throw around, oh, your enrollment in this year was this, I'm like, yeah, those are never accurate
Those are
numbers.
fluid numbers.
Yeah,
So if we go back to slide 19, I have to ask you,
yep,
in 2008, we started with a certain number of students, we increased by 10%, which we calculated earlier to be 30 students, and now we've lost those 30 students because we're back to 2008 enrollment.
yep.
The inventory in town, as far as living units, has not gone
Hasn't
down.
changed, right.
It's gone up, if
Yep.
anything.
Yep.
So to say that just because we added housing units, we're gonna have more kids than we had
That's
before.
not what-
Because
that's
if
not
you
what-
take 300 kids and increase by 10% and then decrease by 10%, you still get more in the end. Because 10% of 300 is 30, and then take away, well, 10% of 3, you just get less.
You want
Base,
less.
base changes in that across time. Right, those are not all percent changes on the original base, the base changes over time, which may reinforce your point, may go different.
I'm just trying to say, our historical numbers, if this is accurate, 208, we're back to 208 numbers again, and
So what is it, and there's more housing?
there's more housing in town of Lyme than there was in 2008.
But is our costs for the school at what they were at 2008?
No, but
Adjusted-
we're doing a
adjusted-
multiple based on
Right,
student
so
numbers.
adjusted for,
It's
for
40%
adjusted for
higher.
inflation,
Yeah.
we run about 2%
So that's not
a
what-
year.
Yeah,
And
but
inflation.
that's an issue in
But
terms
this
of
is-
town finances, that even if we stay flat, we stayed flat, if we just,
This is more informative, right? This just tells you our enrollment by year.
Right.
But that, John, also, that includes the cost
It goes up and
of
goes down.
the expansion, which we
Right,
won't do
right, sure.
regularly. And doesn't include, so for example, this year we're returning money. And at different places, there have been times we return money. So
We're not back to
it's, the cost of educating a child
Charts.
now versus
Percent charges?
2008 is a higher dollar value.
And I don't know what comparative
No,
enrollment means anyway.
no.
yeah.
Because they're,
All right, so, just another thing I wanted to mention, and tell me if this makes sense, but we're dealing with these different scenarios. One thing I think should be made clear, because of where the tripwires, where we would really go into more cost. It's not like, okay, let's have 50 of these and 50 of these, and one from column A and one from column B. They're doing scenarios really by 50s, if I understand correctly, where is it, do you want this 50 or do you want this 50? Does that make sense, or am I misunderstanding?
Well, if this is more of an art than a science, I would say that development is the same way. I think that.
No, I'm not talking about the school, I'm talking about.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not, I'm saying, I'm talking development.
Yeah.
So I think I'm agreeing with your point, where they're saying, okay, well, it's 50 of this, it's 50 of this, or 50 of this. In reality, what the art is, it's what are proportional ratios of this type of development to this type? That's the work.
And I would add to that, from a planning point of view, what gets very difficult is, say like, oh, okay, well, we want 50 of these. Well, on a practical level, we have to, the planning board has to address, okay, we want 50 more of these. It's, you can't pass a law. We want 50 of these, we have to actually get that to work. And that's a challenge.
But couldn't you say, look at the nuance and say, okay, so if we're looking at overall development and we're trying to say how much there is, we get, and this is where you have to tell me, can you say, we will allow a certain percentage of this type of development to so much of this type of development? Can you do that?
We can't do that.
You
Unless
can't.
we change the zoning to say you can only do that development if you also do, so 40% single
Well,
family
I
and
mean,
60% condo, or if that's what
There's
the
a
mix
degree
is.
to which we
We
could,
could
I mean,
say
right now,
you had to do
we
that.
have this
But we'd have to
senior
change the
housing
zoning.
article, which
Right.
is, we're getting feedback from the RPC, and let's just say we need more explanation. But in that, as it exists now, and the way it exists now, if I'm reading their feedback properly, it seems like it's probably a little bit overgenerous, but what it allows is double the amount of conversions to 12 instead of 6 if it's senior. And it also has a component right now, I don't know if it'll stay in there, where you can put in workforce housing and a regular unit, sort of as a bonus. So, if you get creative, there are ways to address it, but then we need feedback to see, well, is this really gonna work, or are we gonna blow things up by doing this? So it's a real challenge.
Mhm.
So one additional question that I have about this is, you've heard Jeff and at least me talk about school costs and our concerns about that. I'd be curious to hear from the two of you if you would actually be comfortable with only a $90,000 increase in the municipal budget if the town is getting, 100+ new residents.
Part of my analysis of all this is that we have two separate, to me, committees or tasks at hand. We have a planning board that plans development. We have a budget committee that curtails the budget. Say the select board, it isn't really, it's the budget committee that determines the budget for the town. So the budget committee looks at all of those expenses now. Right now, historically, what we have seen is the budget committee looks at a budget and they pass budgets that have absolutely no correlation whatsoever to an analysis of how the town's tax base is doing. And that, to me, is a problem. If we don't have 1.2% growth in our tax base, we can't afford 7% increase in our taxes. We can't. And that's what's happening right now. And not only that, the 1.2% growth of our tax base, over half of it, if not 70% of it, has been appreciation, not new inventory. Well, you take a higher tax rate times appreciation, your taxes go to the moon. So we need new inventory.
Yeah,
A percentage growth of new
except
inventory.
that this is what's going on in every town, and there isn't a magic bullet. Our taxes are gonna go up no matter what, and that's what, who was the guy,
So,
what was the guy?
Stu Arnett.
Stu Arnett, that's what he said, when he said, the best we're gonna do is slow the rate
so
of
we
growth.
made the point earlier, and I'm gonna
Increase of
pull up the
taxes,
current
no growth.
studies, but, you know, we can look at sales in town, just like they're new development, because essentially it is new development, from the standpoint of, where did that sale go? Did that sale go to families with children, or did it go to someone who didn't have children? Okay, and my study a year and a half ago was saying 23% to 30% of our new home sales went to housing students. The other 70% did not. So to sit here and assume, and that's gonna happen whether we do it or
We're
not, that's gonna
assuming.
happen.
We have these consultants who are giving us scenarios.
Yeah, well,
We're not assuming
Based on
anything.
27, right, 0.27 children per
Per household.
household.
well, that's, yeah, but I'm just saying the houses as a total ratio, it wasn't the actual number of students. We didn't count the students that were in those houses. But I just looked at the sales and said, okay, this house actually has a high school kid in it, or two, or whatever, and so these houses, so if we have absolutely no new inventory, our if we keep this going, is the student population gonna change? Only if the ratio changes, because we must be losing, I mean, imagine, we're losing, if the population of the school has not grown, although it has from this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand that other.
Well, that's just because we saw our growth from 2006 to 2012.
Had some decline.
That was our peak, and then from basically 2000, I don't wanna give an exact date, somewhere around 2012 to now, we've seen it relatively stay within 5 students, but it's, the big difference is, we went from an average of 85 high school students as a plateau for a number of years, to now 105 on average high school. So that was our big shift. And so now what we're seeing is a relatively stable period of growth of enrollment to be just around 200 compared to 13 years ago when it was right around 150.
Okay, could I make a radical proposal?
Can I go back to John's question? Because I don't think, no, do you have an answer? No. So one of the slides, that again, wasn't presented here, that breaks down where some of these numbers come from. So they're estimating that 61% of municipal expenditures are variable. Okay? So the 90,000 you see there is, my guess is, where does that come from? Yeah.
That's why I was wondering if that is.
Well, it's based on the 61% being variable, so.
Right.
Do we believe the 61%
Well,
being variable?
they added a caveat about, they said that the 61% had a slight bias towards development. That's what they said.
Well, they talked with all the department heads, right, to figure out what was variable and what was fixed.
Yeah.
So that's,
Oh,
no, they went and talked with everybody to establish what that rate was. So, I mean, we might say that's an odd number, but that's what they determined when they teased out all of
Okay,
that.
I'd just like to jump in here because
Yeah.
we're starting to spin our wheels and we're at 8:30. I think we've said a lot. Rich has his notes. Now we really have to make some decisions. And we have the issue of, we didn't get the funding for the other two
Visits.
forums.
Mhm.
The first one is supposed to be next week. We've done no publicity. We don't even have a flyer up. And we have to make some decisions. I mean, I don't see how we can have a forum next week, frankly. Because we haven't done any publicity. We're not doing what we need to do to make sure that people get out there.
I don't think we can have a forum next week either, especially if it's gonna be the only one.
We can have, and I don't think we can have only one.
And well, the one that they come to can't be from 4 to 6, which is when we have it scheduled next.
Yeah, I think we need three forums. It's what we promised the public when they came, it's what we've traditionally done. Because you're just not gonna get, our goal is to have maximum participation. And I think 3 is crucial.
Has this data changed anybody's mind from the position they came into the
Let's not
conversation?
go down that rabbit hole.
No,
We've been doing this for a year.
Right.
And we're still asking questions about the data, and we're still arguing about this slide, which is the scenarios. I wouldn't say arguing, but no one totally understands the variables. I mean, I wanted to see a sensitivity analysis based on number of students and the price of the house. Those are the 2 drivers. I mean, if we sold $5 million houses, we'd make a lot of money in the town. So, you know, you can make this slide say whatever you want.
I guess that's
As
my
long as the
point.
town understands that it's all about the tax revenues from the house and how many kids are coming to school, you know, then you can make these numbers work.
I think people understand that.
Right.
So that's what he ought to say.
Right. My question is that either the great job thing about a consultant is they can come in and if they tell everybody what they think they wanted to hear, then they've done their job, but nobody's changed their position. Has there been anything that in the investigation, anybody would say, okay, that was unexpected, that's changing my
Yes.
position on this?
Yes,
Okay.
I was surprised that the school was flat. I was very surprised.
I was surprised that there was like no commercial
2008
scenarios.
to
Yeah,
now.
we just questioned that,
There's
that's
one in
not
here.
even accurate.
Well, I know, but we're
It's
not,
like-
I mean,
I don't even
you
know that
know,
slide.
I
It's just-
thought that this whole topic started with, you know, Nils talking about his little town in Ohio and getting commercial development there, and that's where this was going, because, I mean, what we were hearing on the planning board from the community development committee was that we're supposed to rezone Route 10, and so what I'm not seeing is any, I want an explanation as to, I mean, why, this presentation needs to say something about why we're not talking about commercial when we get to this point. Why is commercial?
Because they ruled it out earlier.
Well, I didn't hear Steve say that, you know, here.
He
I
said
didn't-
that
He says it earlier.
The traffic count slide.
Yeah.
Okay,
he
so-
said
He says
it's
major
just-
retail,
yeah.
right? He doesn't say.
Right, but
No,
it
not all
doesn't say
commercial,
manufacturing.
but-
It talks about adding a
But that's,
Okay,
to Vicky's
okay.
point, the original
But I need to.
contention was that
Okay, well,
we
I
could
haven't- I
have some
haven't
big stuff
seen
and it
that,
would
so
be
I just-
a exclusion.
Yeah, 'cause
So they
he's adding-
kind of just ruled that out at the beginning.
Right,
Yeah,
but
and he has
there
a-
needs to be more explanation about that, you know, about why no commercial.
You
Okay.
mean no commercial as opposed to major?
Well-
He has a scenario here of adding 100,000 square feet.
Okay, well, that's good, because I didn't get to look at this before I came
Yeah, I think
here,
that's
so-
part of the problem.
Right, but I think that is the, why are we focusing on residential development instead of, you know, jobs
Because they
and-
ruled it out.
Okay, well, that I didn't get,
That one's been,
you know, up front.
that one's been a long one.
So that's what I am surprised.
But I mean, ultimately, in terms of what, you know, all of us have various points of view and everything. I think the point of this is not whether it's changed our minds, it's for them to go to the public and make us relatively irrelevant. I mean, we're part of the town, so we can get up and, you know, ask some hard questions too. But the whole point of having a consultant is to get us out of the way.
Yes. Which raises the question of what, if we have 3 forums and they can only do one of them, what happens to the
I
others?
think they have to do all 3, because these are their numbers. We can't get up there and
I agree completely.
we need to raise $5,000 for the town to spend $5,000.
We don't have it.
Well, you know, and thank you LCDC for raising the $15,000. I mean that sincerely. And so if we have to spend $5,000 as a town on visioning for the future of Lyme, the town should be able to do that.
Could we video the presentation, first one, and show segments of that, stop it, let's talk about what we see?
But then it's us.
It's the answering questions.
It's us,
is the hard
and,
part.
and that's not our data.
Right,
I'm not gonna defend their data.
Well, but, I mean, that's a question that I realize I don't know the answer to. Will they give us the underlying data?
yes. I think
I would
that we
certainly
said
hope so.
that the data was ours in the contract, or at least that was something that I
Doesn't seem like it.
reviewed the contract that said that all the data would be ours.
I believe in the last visioning go-around, was the RPC did it. They led all of the,
They did, they were there the whole time.
and they kept the planning board out of it.
Yep.
I can't see any way it's appropriate for any of us to be up there.
We should be.
Okay.
That was driven home the last time.
Oh, come on, we can get Jack to
Yeah,
do the presentation
Jack.
for us.
Okay, so I'd like to bring things to conclusion.
Yeah.
We haven't had enough time in this presentation, we have a bunch of comments. It's gotta be at least one more revision, whether we do it or they do it, somebody's gotta make these changes. We're not gonna make the 17th,
No,
and we've still gotta figure out if we're gonna present this, if we're gonna do it 3 times, we've gotta come up with a scenario to get the 3 presentations somehow. So I think we can agree that, you know, we need to meet again in 2 weeks, or a week, or
I think
whatever.
a week. I mean, there has to be some urgency, or we might as well push us into the spring, because we're running out of time.
Well, are we gonna have something new to talk about in a week?
I don't know.
Neither do I.
I mean, what I took away from them, frankly, was their attitude from all the stuff that everybody sent in was, okay, we hear you, but, you know, those are your opinions, and you can raise them at the meeting. What I came away with is they're gonna stick with their numbers, and that's what they're gonna do.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
They're saying scope.
Yeah,
I think we can't, at some level, we're trying to micromanage the presentation.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think. Let
If
them,
I
I
was
would say
them,
let
I
it
would,
rip.
you know, which is kind of crazy. And that's why we need to have them do the presentations.
So to your point, I agree, I think next week is just a non-starter. I think we need to decide, are we gonna get 3, are we gonna get 3 forums? If we get 3, are we gonna be able to fit them in between now and the winter? Those are the decisions we need to make.
And there's nowhere the select board can scratch up. We need 5,000 more, was that right?
Was
It's
it
about
4450?
Something like that.
3450?
And we've already approached the Lyme
Is it
Foundation.
worth
We did, and I think very intelligently, they turned us down, because this is by its nature a contentious, difficult process, there's no way around that. And they felt that it was a little, would be dicey for them, and I thought it was, you know, they made a good point.
Well, can we negotiate with resilience on the price of said forums?
What they were gonna do was crunch a bunch of data and input, right? So it wasn't, I mean, obviously, the meeting, they don't have meeting prep for the
Right.
second and third, it's the
It's
follow-up
the
stuff.
it's the travel and the work. There are 2 people. They're gonna come here for the
Right,
presentation.
right,
And the $5,000 for them to come to the other 2.
yes, 4450.
Yeah, 4450,
And you've already spent 50.
yeah, essentially.
So the
Yeah,
question
well,
is,
we
do
have
you
one.
invest 5 to actually get something from the 50?
Well, we get one presentation.
We get one presentation,
With 15?
And presumably we get a final report.
definitely, yeah.
Do they both, are
They
they
said,
both coming?
what?
Are they both coming?
Yeah,
Why don't they both come do the first one, and then?
I think they
one
are
of them-
both
And then
coming.
one of them comes to do the second one? If we're talking about ways to make it cheaper.
What do you
Well,
want?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Is there anything
We
you guys need?
had a development committee meeting earlier,
Yeah.
and
Thanks for coming, Jim.
one of our
I need your list. I
conclusions
need to
is
finish my list. Thanks.
we haven't gotten our money's worth yet.
Well,
I think that's a fair
That's,
argument.
that's
And
your
I'm
opinion, I mean,
opposed, that's my opinion,
Yeah.
and I'm opposed to giving them any more money.
so you're opposed to having the 3 forms with that, with them?
With them.
With them. So how would you do the other 2 forms?
As has already been stated.
How?
If we can video it, we can show them the questions that come up, we will have answers to.
I'm not
And if
okay with
there's
that.
other questions that come up,
We
with
should
the
not
expert.
be involved.
Listen, will you listen to me?
Yeah,
With the expertise that's around this table, we can answer most of the questions. And if not, we can get the answers and get it back to them.
I disagree. Strongly. I don't
John,
think
we
it's,
heard you.
it's
Okay?
appropriate.
We heard you.
I'm not done, Rusty.
I heard you. You just
I'd
wanted to-
like, is it okay if I finish?
I don't think so, because you just interrupted her 6 times to say you disagree, and I
don't think-
understand you
didn't ask.
disagree.
Rusty, can you let me finish? I think it's very inappropriate for the planning board to take that role.
Don't take it.
And it's inappropriate for the LCDC to
I
take that
disagree.
role. Right, we disagree.
I think what you get with having them up there is not, it's more than where the number came from, it's the ability to put it in context that,
But we will have that.
if taping the presentation is a substitute for some wisdom of their careers, that's a stretch.
I intend to listen.
I
know
agree that
all-
we haven't got a lot of value for the first 15.
I
So I have
agree.
trouble giving them another 4,500. So, it may be, that,
But that's a separate, but it's a separate question as to whether it's in the best interest of the town for any of us to be up there.
I certainly am not advocating that any of us be up there.
Okay.
But I'm not advocating taking this to the town either. I think there's just way too many questions.
So you don't want to take this to the town? You don't want them to
That's
come?
current, this was supposed to be this is what we were supposed to review, that they were gonna present.
Well, Rich is gonna draw up questions for them.
And they're gonna come back, just like the last set of questions, and say, out of scope, we'll handle this at the presentation, or at the forum.
And on that basis, assuming that that's the case, you don't wanna go forward?
I wouldn't take this presentation to the town. I think it raises more questions than it gives answers.
Seems to me the public is naturally going to immediately ask both members of the planning board and members of the LCDC what our opinions are about what the analysts have presented.
Sure.
And, I mean, if we come back and we say what Chris just said, or what I think most of us feel about this presentation, I don't know. It seems to me that we have to be comfortable with these scenarios, the underlying numbers. They're gonna say, Rusty, is that 90 grand, right? And they're gonna say to Jeff and the school board, are those numbers right? And we're all gonna have to wring our hands and say, not really. I mean, because I can tell you as a school board member, that is not, it's interesting as a matter of economic analysis to place that, cost figure on per pupil in the scenarios, but it's not accurate.
So what are the proposals going forward, to just abandon what we've gotten so far?
I don't think we're gonna make a decision about that tonight. We've already been here an hour and 45. We've made a ton of edits. I think we should divvy up a couple tasks. I think one person should be in charge of contacting them and saying, are you guys gonna improve this, because we're not satisfied with what you brought to us thus far. I think these guys should come up with, if there are any scenarios to get additional money or not. or whether, videoing is we may be disagreeing,
So Chris-
but we need to divvy up some tasks if we're gonna make
Right.
progress.
But are we not satisfied with their explanation or what their numbers are? I mean,
Their explanation, I
Yeah.
read those
So
slides,
they just
and
need
then
to-
I have more questions, and I've been doing this for a year, and we've listened to them, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just so frustrated. I feel like I could have done that in a weekend.
so you would like them to explain where their numbers come from more, basically.
And the slide should be self-evident.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
whole
well, I think we
presentation
all-
should be
we all
clear,
agree on
it's,
that.
it should be clear, it's a little bit unprofessional, in my opinion. If we're sitting here looking at these numbers and going, as we have all this done, there are gonna be lots of questions.
So-
The same thing's gonna happen in forum, which is why we shouldn't be up there, because
So-
we're like,
So
I don't
maybe
know.
we should just
So
talk
maybe,
to them.
I think,
yeah,
but
so
I think
maybe
we
that-
have good cause to tell them we're not satisfied with it, and they've kind of given us the runaround on that before.
Okay, so in terms of contacting them, what are the things
I think Chris should be the one
specifically?
to contact
But
them.
I'd like to know specifically, what are the things we want to ask them?
Let's get Rich's list and,
Yeah, Richard's the list.
But if they addressed Rich's list, would that be satisfying?
No, there's.
Yeah, so that's what I want to
Yeah.
get.
We'll see.
So why don't we take a week to work up that list rather than try to put it together
Okay.
right now? And so we'll do it via email to both groups and saying, and I'll take charge of that if I can have a week to do it.
Sure.
And I'll send it out to everybody and say, this is what
Well,
I'd
you
like to do.
can't send it, can you send it out
Yes.
to everyone? Is that okay?
Just the list, it's
Yeah,
information.
but nobody can respond to that.
So,
so you're gonna send Rich's list out to all of us.
plus whatever I add over the next week and any input that people have, but I'm not comfortable with taking this to the town.
Right, but is it okay for you to send out your annotations to Rich's list over email? Is that have open
Yeah,
meeting?
he's compiling the information, and
We-
he's
we
gonna
can't-
disseminate it to everybody in both groups.
And we can't respond.
We can't
You
respond.
just can't respond.
And then we
Or
could
each could
meet and
respond
decide
directly,
whether or
but
not
not
it's
reply
comprehensive
all.
enough to ask them to make changes.
Okay,
They may say no, but at least we'll all agree that these are the problems that we have with their current work
okay, that's good.
output.
And it seems like we don't have we really don't have a time limit on this, right? I mean, we can have forms in the winter.
Well, the winter would be hard.
Well, I'm sorry.
I was thinking that the timeline was so that we might affect some zoning changes based on what comes out of this. But it's not happening if we're not starting our forums until
Right.
later in October. So that was, I think,
That was
what was
the-
driving us.
We wanted to get it in front of the town and townspeople before the next budget cycle and voting cycle,
Right.
and so people had more information about what the town was up against,
So it's not happening.
or not.
Right.
So to make sure I have this right, I'll pull together the notes from here, I'll send them to Chris, Chris can disseminate them to everyone. Everyone can review them, add on and send them back to Chris.
That's great.
So I would actually recommend that you send it to David to disseminate to everyone. Just send one out to David, yours goes to David, David sends it out to everybody.
Okay.
And then if anybody has any responses, they send them back to David, he'll compile those and we'll bring them to the next public meeting.
And we'll see how long that process takes, and we'll have a meeting once we've made some progress on that. And are you guys all right on the revenue side? It may be the same answer in a week,
It
but
may be, but we'll see. But,
Okay.
I mean, I think we have, my personal feeling is, I think we need to see, because of, I don't know what he's gonna say to defend these slides. I mean, if that's gonna be his response to us, that, well, wait till you see me do my presentation, well, then we'll get that first presentation and we'll have to make a decision on whether or not it's worth presenting it again to the public again. And then we'll
I think
spend
that's fair.
But
Yeah.
I just don't see committing to more forums.
Actually, I think that's very fair.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I have the question that's sort of off the topic a little bit, but I understand we're gonna keep the dump recycle open 2 days a week. And could we have saved $20,000 with keeping it open 1 day a week?
That's a very nebulous number, but.
Well, I mean, that's what was in the thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it sounds like the majority of people in town aren't really worried about their property taxes, so why are we even doing it?
Well,
You know, if people are saying we
People
can't even
continue to
save
vote for more
$20,000,
expenditures, and you're not doing
Let's
that.
not-
you know,
that's, so basically the dump can be, there are fees to, we can make that revenue neutral or expense neutral, depending on how we set the budget, so, we have to adjust the fees if it's gonna be more expensive, like, it's a user product, I mean, it's not
Right,
something
right.
that the town,
So you're saying the fees are high enough, it could be neutral?
But the point is, your point is that people are willing to spend more money on services?
Yeah, people are saying, we don't care about saving $20,000, we just want it open
No,
2
they're
days a
not
week.
saying
not saying
that.
that, we're not saying.
Wait, is that,
They're
you got
not
that
saying
from
that,
the,
that question wasn't even asked.
Right.
yeah, it was on the thing that I
They
filled.
just said that that's possible. Would
Right.
you be willing to give up Wednesdays?
Right, saving $20,000.
And the majority would not.
Yeah, and then the majority said, no, we don't wanna give up the Wednesdays, but it was more of a political, logical, I mean, logistics of it.
Well, I'm just,
We did
yeah.
more business on, if you call it business, more traffic on Wednesdays than we did on Saturdays and Sundays.
Right, but I guess my
And
point is.
Saturdays was actually the lowest of all of the 3
Right,
days.
but I guess my point is that people, it sounds like people are saying, we don't care about saving $20,000, we'll just be open 2 days a week.
I don't think it's fair to, I would not read that.
Okay.
Any answers somewhere between?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, don't inconvenience me is what they're saying.
Is everyone comfortable with those action
Yeah.
items?
Yes.
And timeframes, couple days for you to send me?
Couple days, I'll get
Okay, now I'll get something back to the town a couple days after that, and it'll be disseminated to everyone, and we'll work together to figure out the next meeting.
And then to get that to the consultants.
And then we'll figure out who takes it,
Will
who's
you
the messenger.
communicate with Steve for the results of tonight's meeting?
If you guys wanna task me with that, and you guys are
Somebody
comfortable.
needs to tell them we're not having the forum on the 17th.
Yep.
And somebody should probably also get out on listserv that we're not meeting. Because I thought, weren't we gonna have it the 4 to 6 or whatever, because CCL's having a meeting that
Yes.
night? Yeah,
Yeah,
so.
there were
No, we were
conflicting,
having it that time so that people who can't drive after dark could come to it.
well,
we were mixing up the times so
Yeah.
that different people could get there.
So who can take care of listserv?
I'll take care of that.
Okay, so let's make sure, and I'll take care, if you guys are comfortable, I'll give them a quick call, say, we still got issues with the work content and the forum. We're gonna work on it ourselves, and we'll get back to them in a week,
Yeah.
so they know that we
Okay.
can hold off. Okay? Motion to adjourn?
Good.
Second again.
Third, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, progress.
Thank you both for all your efforts. It's, no good deed goes unpunished, and I know you guys put a lot of effort into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Between you and me, I think we failed.
And it may be, Sue, that, I would rather not take that to anyone in its current state. After, and again, we've only had it for a couple hours. I've been through it once, but I'm pretty unhappy.